Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Lumos Lens. My name is Rich Katz. I am the superintendent in residence with Lumos Learning. Today, we are joined by Abigail Selly, who is the principal of Friendship Elementary School in Beaufort, Georgia, which is a position that she has held since April of 2022. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about leadership practices that drive school improvement and instructional excellence. Before we kind of dive into the details of that, first, just talk a little bit about your path. What inspired you to go into education? How did it all start, and how did it lead to your position today as a school leader?
Sure. So my story is probably much like so many other people's out there, and it simply it happened. I had an educator who poured into me, and he had been telling me, gosh, since I was probably a freshman in high school, that I should be a teacher. And I didn't believe him. And then when my path that I, as a 18-year-old, thought was the right one for me, didn't quite work out. I was back visiting home, and he said, "Come on, just give it a shot." And I loved Spanish. I had studied in Spain, so I said, "You know what? I'm going to be a Spanish teacher. I'm going to try it out." And then after my first day of student teaching, I actually called him on my way home from Bedford, North Lawrence in Indiana, and said, "Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Why didn't I do this from the get-go? This is exactly where I'm meant to be. I love every second of this." And that exhaustion at the end of the day was one that was wrought with joy, and that was a pretty fun change. And so from there, I was a Spanish teacher, and at some point, I decided that education, or I recognized really that education is full of change, and that I would rather be an agent of change than of it. And so I decided I'd really like to have an impact on the trajectory of education as a whole. And so I started exploring that administration route, went from being a dean of students to an assistant principal and athletic director, and CTA coordinator at that role as well. And then now I'm here. I've been at the high school, middle school, and elementary level. So it's been really fun.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's really interesting. And so is there a level that you're more drawn to? I know you're in elementary school now, and they're all a little bit different.
They're all honestly so different. And I felt really fortunate to be at each level at the stage of my life that I was. I was, high school teaching and coaching. When I was fresh out of college, still had all the energy to be a coach outside of my teaching responsibilities as well. I don't know. I can't say that there's
Love it all.
really one level that I'm drawn to more. I really and truly love them all.
Right. So one of the things that I came across, and I was reading a little bit about you before we came on here, and I saw that your superintendent had described you as someone who listens with a servant's heart. And then I noticed that in your letter, you kind of describe yourself as a lead learner in your building. So, those are two kind of important phrases or things that really stuck out. So let's take them one at a time. So when you think about being called a servant leader, like, what does that mean to you? What does that look like kind of day to day inside your building?
Well, that's a really good question. And the reality is that it's just that is who I am. I really feel very called to serve the community that I'm in. And my students and my teachers. I think the main part of my job is just being here to serve this community in the best way that I can. And that community changes, right? We were talking about the community as a whole, really educating the youth and giving them the best experience and exposure to education, but also to our teachers. I really don't think that I have as much to do with my student experience as I know that that's not a thing. I know that I don't have as much to do with my students' experience as their homeroom teachers. And so just making sure that I'm serving them so that they can do their job.
Right. Well, I think that statement probably sums up then where that comes from. So talk about being the lead learner. What is that? How do you model that? What does that mean to you when you introduce yourself that way on your page? And I'm sure that plays out day to day.
Well, that's very true. I'm 100% learning every single day here. And in education, we talk a lot about being a continuous learner. But the reality for me personally is elementary was a brand new level to me. And I walked in knowing that I don't know it all. And if I do my job as the leader in this building and hire the right people, that I will be learning from those people continuously every single day. And here, 4 years in, I'm still every day learning something new from our kids, from our teachers. But I also see it as my responsibility to make sure that I'm seeking the things outside of this building and, the new research and the next best thing in education, and vetting that process so that we're not inundating our teachers with the new pendulum of education that we all know happens, and making sure that what they get is really worth their time and worth their energy.
Right. What do you think is a really important leadership lesson? You're mentioning you had to do a lot of learning. So what's something you kind of came across that's made a difference and sort of shaped the way that you lead?
Really and truly, for me, it's about listening first and remembering that in that classroom, in each of our classrooms here, I'm not the expert. I need to be an expert on so many things, but your homeroom classroom is not it. I need to know what good instruction looks like, but I need to sit back and listen and watch before I jump in with hey, have you tried this? Let's do this. I think we need to do this. And giving that what we often call feedback, and it's really just imposing myself on their classroom.
Okay. So talk about balancing that with, how do you hold your teachers to high expectations for instruction, but then still make sure they know that you're there supporting them? And I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying, but maybe you can give some examples of how that works in your school.
Yeah, so I think that is one of the most important things of being a leader, is that really has to come from a very genuine point in your relationship with people. They have to know that you care about them deeply as humans, as educators, as the instructional leader in their classroom. And you have to actually believe that about yourself. I know that for me, I trust my teachers and I can support them. And so I think in terms of our relationship, they know that that's really how I feel. That's how I feel behind closed doors. That's how I feel out in the open in front of them. I'm kind of an open book. I couldn't hide it anyway, even if I tried. There's nothing about this job that can be disingenuous, because frankly, teachers are really smart and they're really good people, right? They pick up on everything. They need to know that every decision I make is coming from a point of supporting our student learning and their own growth as well. And in terms of high expectations, I mean, I'm really fortunate to work with educators who care a lot about what they do and care a lot about their kids. I've said this in interviews before, and it's pretty common knowledge that if you don't love our kids, you don't last long here. And that's an expectation I have for teachers. We're going to love them. We're going to love them hard. We're going to love them enough to teach them how to read. But if you walk into my office and you say, these kids, we're probably going to have a crucial conversation about what that means to you.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you give feedback, and I mean, especially thinking about, schools probably now, and I'm sure yours is no different, have teachers at so many different stages in their career. So, what does instructional feedback look like in your school? And, do you differentiate based on where those teachers are? Is it the same for everybody? Kind of, talk a little bit about that.
So it absolutely depends on the person. I wouldn't say that we necessarily have a formalized differentiation plan for feedback, because we're all human, and I'm going to talk to you like a human who cares a lot about what you do. I hope this isn't unique to education, but it is very uniquely education focused, and that every person in this building showed up today to do the very best that they can. And I would say 99% of the people here feel as if they've been called to do this work. And so no one's showing up being like, I'm going to do a mediocre job today, right? And so when we have those conversations about, hey, have you tried this in your classroom? Or, hey, I noticed you're struggling here. It's coming from a place of love and acknowledgement of, I know that you are doing the very best that you can. I don't have slackers, right? And so we're going to walk alongside you. And it looks like me coming into your classroom, our assistant principal coming into your classroom, our instructional coach, or doing peer observations, things like that. We are very much working towards a culture in this building of everybody's going in. We're learning from each other's strengths, and it's not a competition. These are all of our children. And that has been a culture shift and identity shift in this building, that collective efficacy of, these are all of our kids. Even in the hallway, you see a kid who's not walking in a number one line in the hallway, we're going to say it with love, but we're going to correct that behavior because we know that efficiency means more instructional minutes in the classroom.
Right. So what are the keys to creating an environment like that where there is this shared purpose, shared responsibility? That is definitely something that not all schools have. So, what do you think in creating it where you did there? What do you think are some of the keys? Like if you were telling another principal, these are the steps you need to take. And I know it's not a formula, but, just kind of some guiding principles. What would those things be?
Well, I would start by simply saying it needs to be who you are at your core. It needs to be a true and genuine core value of yours as the leader of the building, because that means that is what you're putting out into the culture of your building every single day, right? That care and kindness and compassion and frankly, love for your job. I couldn't do this job if I didn't love what I do and love these kids and love these teachers. And that really needs to be who I am every single day. Even when I'm tired, I still love what we're doing here and I still value it, so that when I am having these hard conversations, it's coming from a place of just data or just fact or just observation. It's very, very objective. And that is also projected on everybody in this building. Again, I don't think it has everything to do with me. It has a lot to do with our leadership team, right? And that's everyone from our nurse to our counselor to our assistant principal to our coach to our secretaries in the front office, because it's really hard to be a pessimist when you're surrounded by people who are loving every single day.
Right.
And it's not every day is not easy, right? This is a really hard job, but we acknowledge that. Yes, we know this job is hard. You better love who you're doing it with and who you're doing it for.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned data. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you ensure that it's being used as a reflective tool that actually changes classroom practice? Sometimes it's a scary word to people. And, I know we've been saying that for decades at this point, but for some, it really still is. And some people struggle to understand what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. So, what are some of your practices in terms of making sure that it's productive and not overwhelming?
That is a great question, and that's totally a balance that we have to walk, right? I think we can talk a lot about loving our kids and our culture here, and that all feels like the warm and fuzzies. But the reality is our culture wouldn't be great if people didn't feel like they were being successful, if we didn't have kids who were also invested in their success. And so that has been a shift. That's something that we've really been working on the last few years. We really hit it hard, I would say, late fall of last year, where, I felt like I was in a little bit better space to really make that transition in the building. And that sort of, if you ask me about, talking to a new principal walking in, that first year really is about learning what processes and procedures are in place. Where are the holes? I was really lucky that the principal before me had set us up for success. And so we were ready to accept this transition. Mm-hmm. And then, especially at the beginning, you're really strategic about which data you're using. What are we pulling so that it doesn't feel like a gotcha? We're not probably going to highlight some of those more quote unquote negative statistics right at the beginning. And it's making sure that not just from me, but from the coach, from the assistant principal, from everybody who's talking about data, that it's coming from a place of growth and less of a place of inadequacies or deficiencies. We can look at deficiencies, right? When we're able to disaggregate that data down to, hey, at this specific standard in this specific grade level, we've got 30% of our kids are not at grade level there, are not meeting that standard. We can look at those deficiencies, but that's for creating small groups. Again, a place of growth. Where can we highlight those deficiencies in a way that really build them up versus not? Now, it's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? Yeah. There have been times that our data shows like, hey, we need to make some pretty significant changes. And frankly, and maybe this is just my personality, but I would much rather have those conversations head on. Hey, we didn't necessarily see the growth or the achievement that we were looking for in this one specific area. We're going to need to make this change. I need you guys to know that I love you and I trust you as professionals, and I think you can handle this. Mm-hmm. And it's not a, gosh, what were you doing? Right. Mm-hmm. But all right, we got to buckle down now. I think about our second grade last year, if we're looking for specific examples, mm-hmm. And we didn't see the growth that we thought we would see And I have this incredible team that really believes that these are all our kids. And they came in after our data conversation. They came to us, the assistant principal, the coach, and I, and said, hey, we don't think this is reflective of what our kids can do. Can we try this new model where on what used to be our enrichment days, can we do class size reduction on those days? So when our gifted students are in the gifted classroom, we're going to pull really targeted groups during that time as a grade level. And we were like, okay. And, as a leader, I have to know when to just get out of their way, because I've got incredible people doing the job that they were meant to be doing, and they're the experts in that field. Cool, you do it. And then they have the highest growth in the county. And so it's all about just kind of, recognizing that your students aren't defined by a number. I do understand that. And that our teachers aren't defined by the numbers in their classroom, but also letting them take the data a little bit personally and then celebrating that, like, hey, absolutely. I'm glad that made you mad. Let's work on it together and see how we can fix it.
Yeah. It's all about the messaging and the way you kind of package it and share it. Like you said, the information is what it is, but the way you present it is going to determine how people actually receive it and then how they act on it. Mm-hmm. So how do you decide where not to focus on when you look at the data? Because there's so many competing priorities that, you might say, well, this area is important and here's something we're struggling on. And so when you look at, kind of instructional practice or goals that you set, you choose the areas that you're like, here's our goals, here's our focus, but that means you left something out. So how do you make those decisions?
Right. You're always going to leave something out. That's a really good way to put it. We're in a really data rich environment. Now, I'm fortunate to work in a district where they really support us in that disaggregation of data so that we can really see what's beneficial to our school communities. Mm-hmm. When you're in a district of almost 30,000 students, you have to diversify your strategies. Mm-hmm. Because every school is different. And then within each of our schools, we have an incredible range of teachers and students and demographics, abilities, all of the things, right? And so our district does a really good job of providing us with data and then helping us kind of pare that down. As a school, our intention is, and hopefully always will be, to focus. Now, I don't think it's a secret that teachers are way inundated with all of the things. And I gotta say sorry to my middle school and high school friends out there, but elementary teachers in that homeroom role, I mean, we've got our kindergarten teachers are teaching some kids who are already fluently reading or know all of their number facts. And they're like teaching them to wash their hands after they go potty, mm-hmm. or maybe just like right. when to ask to go potty, right? They are helping them learn to walk in a number one line. They are helping them to learn just how to school in general, how to open their darn milk cartons at lunch. Those are the worst. And you see everything that teachers are doing. And so my job as the leader is to help them focus in on this is what's really important. It's not going to be everything. There are years that our math and our numeracy is going to slip a little bit because we're really focusing on reading. That usually depends on what, curriculum is coming down the pipeline or what new initiatives are coming down the pipeline. But I think, I hope, at least because this is where I focused a lot of my energy as a leader, one of the most important things that I can do is filter out that over information and just give them what matters right now, just enough at just the right time. And so in terms of how we choose, we do data conversations with our teachers during their mid-years. This year, our focus on those data conversations were, it was simply on our school improvement goal. So moving that center portion of children up by 2%. And we wrote it out, which kids made it, which kids didn't. Because again, teachers have access to all this data, but do I really want them to spend their time essentially regurgitating the facts of the spreadsheet? No, I'd rather do that for them, and then we can talk about it. But you run into the issue of teachers saying, oh man, but my kids grew so much. And we have to kind of backtrack a little bit and be like, oh my gosh, yes, they did. Your kids grew a huge amount, but this data point right here is just achievement. So we're just looking at that bubble group of achievement. And then we've got ready to go on our screens right there. We have a quadrant report that shows them high growth and high achievement together, so we can turn our computers around and say, hey, don't worry, we looked at this too, but on this piece of paper, this is just this one data point. if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. And, I can tell that you spend a lot of time just making sure there's a very clear focus, clear purpose. This is what we're focused on. This is what we're doing. And it sounds like you try to remove a lot of those distractions. I am laughing though at, I don't think that debate from middle school, high school, and elementary teachers will ever go away of, who's working more or harder or different. But
it's all hard. It's all a very complicated and important job. I agree.
I agree too.
Everything. There's just a lot of different pieces that come along with the elementary piece.
There absolutely are. So talk a little bit about teacher leadership, because, you say over and over, we're a team, we're all in this together. We have this shared purpose, and obviously you do set the tone and you do set the direction, but, how do you empower others and make sure that there's, opportunities that people really feel like I can be a leader in this too?
Mm-hmm. So, for me, it's about knowing your people, because there are so many leaders in this building that don't necessarily carry a leadership title or a leader title, but that I recognize them as sort of the thought leaders in the building. And they're the people who can come into my office and they say, hey, are you aware that this is happening? Or, hey, I was walking past this grade level and it just feels a little tense down there right now. Maybe you should go. And they're kind of my insider information, and they're the people I really trust to understand the climate in the building. But then we also have tons of people who I know because we have these conversations as early as their interview, or if they were already here in their mid-years, or there's somebody that's, hey, what are your goals? What's your 5-year plan? Because I was a young educator who kind of knew what direction I wanted to head in. And I had leaders in my building who allowed me that opportunity and that growth. And so sometimes that looks like, hey, do you want to shadow our instructional coach for a day or two? Do you want to present? Do you want to shadow myself or the assistant principal? Do you want to represent us at a district level meeting? Things like that, just to broaden the perspective of people who know that that's the direction they want to go in. I want to be able to have them walk into these roles with eyes wide open, because so much of our job happens behind closed doors. But I would say that more than anything, it's just really important to have leaders in the building who people trust, and who trust you to react when a reaction is necessary. One of the things we did this year for the first time, and we're definitely doing it again because it was a lot of fun, is we did a summit for our pre-planning, right? It was essentially a conference style where they went to different sessions instead of just listening to me talk, because nobody really wants to listen to me talk when they're fresh off a summer break, right? We do a little like rah, everybody get excited. Let's remember our purpose here. Yeah. But then we broke out into small groups, and we had some of those teachers, leaders who were really passionate in specific areas that were really beneficial. Go ahead and talk to people in a small group setting. And that was pretty cool. And it was really fun for me to see some people who don't normally speak up, but felt a little bit more comfortable to do so in a small group setting where they knew ahead of time and they could prepare their things ahead of time. And I also think it was probably more beneficial for people to hear about it from other educators. As much as I would love to think that every teacher in this building is like, yeah, Miss Sally definitely knows what we're going through every day. The reality is I'm still a principal, and I know that. And they trust their peers probably a little bit more. But even down to like our secretary and bookkeeper, she did a session on how to turn in your field trip money and how to request classroom supplies and things like that. And it just kind of spread that out for everybody in the building. And it was really fun. We're going to do it again.
Yeah, sounds like it. So how do you, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but, we're talking about all the things the teachers need to do and understanding the role that they have and the challenges they're facing every day right now, in their classrooms with their students. And how do you help avoid burnout?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know that you can. The reality is this job is really hard, and I feel that stress and the weight of every day in our teachers and in our building, because when you care so much about something, it's always high stakes. And so I don't know that you can really avoid burnout altogether. We do our best to make their job as fun and meaningful as we can. But the truth is, teaching is a hard job. For us, it's a lot of removing that noise that we talked about earlier, the extra stuff, and trying to be the filter for our teachers and help some of that go away. A lot of it is just logistics, trying to make processes more simple for teachers so that, it's not just a box check. Everything that we add, we're constantly asking, okay, what can we take away? Is this redundant in some form or fashion? Our assistant principal is incredible at taking a look at processes and trying to figure out how to make them more efficient for our teachers. Sometimes that means for our SPED teachers, where burnout is some of the highest, right? Making sure that we've built in time into their schedule or to their months even, to make sure they can really take time not outside of school to plan their IEPs, write their IEPs, schedule those meetings, and make sure that we're covering their sections if we need to, or that we have subs ready to go who are trained and can offer their children services so that we're still getting really strong instruction, but we're also making sure that our teachers have the time to do, frankly, just the logistics and the paperwork part of being a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not perfect, though. If anyone else has any suggestions, I'm open to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your initial answer goes to, what you say about, you confront reality and this is how things are. And the first thing you said was, I don't know that we can totally eliminate it, but we can try to manage it. So, when you think about retention, and maybe it's the same question I'm asking now, just worded a different way, but, there's a teacher shortage. We all know that. There's not as many people coming into the field, and there's a lot more movement than there really ever was before of teachers just moving from one school or one district to another. So, what are in your building? What are the keys for you to try to prevent, or minimize staff turnover? When there's internal pressures and there's external pressures that no matter where teachers go, and no matter what school they're in, they're still going to have those same kind of external things that are impacting them. So how do you focus on retention, while balancing that again with the focus on instructional improvement and keeping that all together?
Well, so focusing on retention, that's a little bit of a dichotomy for me, because while I really do care about maintaining and retaining quality teachers, I also am the first to say that if you feel like this isn't the right spot for you, that's okay. And I will support you and help you get to where you need to go. Because if you don't want to be here, I don't want you here. Our kids need people who are here because they want to be here and because they know that our kids can do incredible and amazing things, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of energy. I try to be really honest in interviews. I tell every applicant, this is an interview for you just as much as it's an interview for me. Right. I need you to believe that friendship is where you need to be. And this is a hard job. Our kids are incredible. This is a hard job. It's a fun job. It's a great job. It's a really meaningful and fulfilling job, but this is a hard job. If you're not willing to work hard, sorry, this might not be the spot for you. And so some of it starts there, but within the building, it's really about being a place that people want to come to work every day, but also not having that false sense of every day is going to be wonderful, right? Being able to walk into a teacher's classroom and say, hey, I know that you're going through a really hard situation. Can I take your class for you so that you can go step out, make that phone call that you need to make? Hey, do you need to go home early today? And just recognizing that people's priorities should lay outside the building as well. And that's not just something we say, but that we live it. They see me prioritizing my family as well. And when we recognize that teachers, winter break, for example, right? Most of our teachers celebrate Christmas. A lot of them are moms. We all know, or parents in general, but we're in elementary school, so we're mostly women. But we know that that's a really stressful time for educators because you've got classroom parties and every teacher gives every student a gift, and you've got parents coming in, and you've got end of semester grades, and all of these things that are happening all at the same time. And they have a family outside that they're probably trying to buy Christmas presents for, or organize travel and things like that. And just being really open and honest with them of, hey, we know you've got this going on. How can we support? Maybe we don't need to have a faculty meeting right now. And instead of our faculty meeting, we're going to let you guys out a little bit early so that you can go do some Christmas shopping before you have to pick your kids up from daycare or whatever the case may be. And so I don't know, it's not perfect, but retention is not something that I worry too much about, as long as the people that are moving on from us are the right people that we would say, hey, yeah, we can help you get to the next step, whether that's leadership maybe, or to a different school or to a different profession.
Whatever. Yeah.
If we're just being transparent, sometimes that's the answer too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like that answer is, if we're creating the right environment here, we're supporting students the way that that we've decided we should be, and following our mission and creating the culture that we believe is right or best, then retention just kind of follows naturally, or not, if people decide it's not the path for them. So that it kind of works itself out, is what you're saying, based on just doing the work the way it should be done. So,
and it's not always about we feed them. They eat well when they're here. We always give, snacks, and we do, once a month, we do some sort of staff appreciation the week before Thanksgiving. But we also recognize that all of that is just extra. We love our teachers. We hope they know that, we appreciate them, and we're hopeful that that's just another way for us to say it. But the day-to-day of this job is too hard to just rely on a meal at the end of the month, or a breakfast or some donuts or something like that. It really has to do with recognizing, it goes kind of back to data, being able to pull the numbers and say, hey, I know you're working super hard every day. Do you see what you did with this kid right here? That hard work is paying off. And that shows them that not only is that exhaustion maybe worth it, but also that somebody recognizes that what they do in their classroom every single day. When we look at a kid and we're like, hey, he was reading on a kindergarten level and he's a fourth grader, and now he's reading on a third grade level, that's a big deal. Look at all that work that you're putting into this child every single day. And we go back to our SPED students, and I've got 4 specialized placement classes, so self-contained regional placement classes here. And when I can look at our SPED teachers and say, wow, you are pushing 6 of your 10 kids into gen ed segments because you've done that much amazing work with them, being able to really personalize that to the work that teacher is doing with the people who matter most to them, their students, means more than donuts at the end of the month.
It definitely does. I agree with that. And you clearly do a great job of recognizing and appreciating all of the things that your teachers do. So when you kind of step back and look at, now you've been in this building for over 3 years, and, I'm going to kind of ask you to do for yourself the same thing you just described that you do for teachers, because you probably, like everyone else, people get caught up in that day to day and don't kind of look at, that bigger picture all the time. I can tell you sometimes do, but I'm going to ask you to kind of share over the 3 years, if someone was doing that with you and saying, look at what you've done, don't lose sight of that. Look how far your students have come, your staff has come, your school has come. What would be the places that you would point to and just kind of say, wow, we really made a lot of progress here, and this has made a big difference?
Gosh, I hate this question, because honestly, it's so much more than me. It really has so little to do with me. I hope I've played a little bit of a part in it. But our shift in the belief in our kids has, and that was something that was totally starting before I got here. Please don't give me all the credit for that. But we have done a very, very good job of remembering every single day that every child can learn at high levels. And something that, so I've worked in Title I schools, I think my whole career. It's a passion of mine, because I feel very strongly that when you are in this building, you will have access to amazing academic experiences, and that you are capable of learning at an incredibly high level. And that goes for teachers and students, frankly, and myself as well, hopefully. But we have, I think, done a very good job of changing the culture in this building to a culture of learning, and a culture of excellence. And we have put this building on the map as an educational leader, not simply as a place where kids are loved. They are loved, and they always have been. That's never been a question in this building. Kids love coming to school here. We have one of the lowest truancy rates in the area because kids just love coming to school here. But that's because I think because they know that their teachers are consistent, they are predictable, that they love them, they have high expectations and structure for them. And I really believe that kids will learn from adults who know they can, and our teachers know they can. And so I think that shift in mentality, again, don't credit me with that, but that has been a huge shift. And I mean, I now have students who, I used to go play catch on the playground with, who, when we play catch now, they're like, hey, did you see that I exceeded my goal on our map testing? And I'm like, I didn't, but this is a really cool conversation that we're having.
Right.
We've sort of shifted that mentality. And then just at like the very basic level of it, when I started here, I had a goal of creating an interdisciplinary farm and garden for our students. Most of our students, not most of them, but a lot of our students come from suburbia where they don't really have yards to play in. We know that this generation of children don't have a ton of chores necessarily, responsibilities outside of their homework or in their home necessarily. And they don't play outside as much as we did when we were kids. And so I said, you know what, we're going to get a farm. And that's what we did. We've got a farm. We've got goats and chickens and ducks, and the kids work on the farm. We've got a fabulous agriculture teacher who takes kids outside to do chores. They learn to care for something outside of themselves. They learn their science standards with their goats and their plants and all their things. And so that's kind of my baby.
Yeah, that's great.
People said I was crazy for, and maybe still am.
No, it doesn't sound that way. It sounds like it's great. I'm sure they love it. I'm sure they all do. And that example that you just shared of students coming up to you and talking about, did you see what I did? I mean, that is probably encapsulates everything that you're talking about, that they're taking pride and ownership in the work that they're doing. And, there's no doubt that's a part of the tone that gets set in the school. So last question I'm going to ask you, and is kind of go back to lead learner. We'll talk about something that you're learning right now and you're working on for yourself as a leader.
Oh, that's a tough one because there's a lot of things. And this time of year, I'm like really just trying to get next year set up because we're totally in the middle of 2 years, kind of. But right now, our biggest focus, and one of my biggest focuses, is to find the balance of, and again, if anybody has any secrets here, I would love to hear them, but to find the balance of collaborative planning. So actually planning for the lesson, looking ahead at the assessments and all of that piece, and a true PLC where we're looking at data, where we're creating student small groups, being able to find the time to do both, but also find that balance between how are we going to plan for instruction, just the simple logistics of the lesson and where are our kids going to get stuck, what academic vocabulary do they need, and using data to inform that instruction. That's a lot, right? That's a full-time job, not a 50-minute once a day job, right? Mm-hmm. And so trying to find that balance and be the leader that my teachers need me to be, and filter out the extra. But right now I'm like, I don't know, it all feels very important. And so that's kind of what I'm learning right now, is how to really make a meaningful PLC cycle while also affording teachers the opportunity to just simply plan for their lesson.
Right. And again, that strikes that balance of everything that you've been talking about. I really appreciate you joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I can tell just from the 40 minutes or so that we spent together chatting that your school is definitely lucky to have you, and your passion for what you do is truly contagious, and I'm sure everybody sees and feels that too.
Well, thank you very much. I definitely feel like the lucky one here. I've got the best job in the world.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again so much, Abby.